Hey, David Brewster here with another episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Stone Temple Pilots. And of course, we're going to be talking about Dean DeLeo and also Robert DeLeo from STP. And I know, Scott Weiland passed away, and it's a horrible, sad story. And definitely, he's a legend, from the 90s. Legendary rock and, alternative rock vocalist. He also sang with Velvet Revolver with Slash. And Velvet Revolver was a great band. But STP, in my opinion, was a really great band because this series really is about chords. And really, Dean DeLeo is, a chord whiz. And for some of you that maybe haven't really worked on Stone Temple Pilots music before, or maybe you've found some tab and stuff online, his chord vocabulary is massive, and he's often kind of overlooked from those '90s, guitarists. A lot of people typically, think, well, they couldn't play solos and they didn't really play chords and everything was in drop D. But that's not the case with all of those players. And Dean is definitely an exception there. The band's influences include, groups like Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin and the Doors and the Stones and a little bit of Pink Floyd, kind of sprinkled in there. So even just that description of influences, regardless of who you are or where you're from or whatever, if those are your influences, I'm probably gonna like your band, because I'm a huge Zeppelin fan. I love Pink Floyd, and I love the Stones and Aerosmith and stuff like that too. But that's a really, cool thing about '90s music is there was this resurgence of all this '70s, kind of respect. You had movies like Dazed and Confused. Of course, Neil Young made a huge comeback in the '90s. A lot of groups kind of tapped into that '70s vibe. Some of the heavier groups kind of tapped into Sabbath, and it was just a cool time for music, even though, some things kind of disappeared and, the style, of grunge and alternative definitely changed, the music on the scene. But it was an exciting time, to be a guitarist and kind of be in bands and to be teaching, which, that's what I was doing at the time, finishing up college and doing all that stuff. But I remember like the contrast, like one minute it was Motley Crue and Dokken and Bon Jovi and whoever, and then the next minute it was STP and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains, Soundgarden and Tool and everybody. But I made that transition where I still listened to a lot of '80s music, but I totally just embraced all the new '90s stuff too. Not all of it, but I did embrace quite a bit of it. Or with the opening, that was the song Wicked Garden, from the album Core, and I've always loved that tune. And I remember around the time that that album came out, I was actually at a haunted house, and I was living, kind of around the Evansville, Indiana area, and it was around Halloween, and I went to this haunted house, and I'd heard the album, but when I walked in and I was kind of going through this haunted house with some friends, Wicked Garden started, and right when the song started with that opening, this tarp like flew back, and this person dressed like Leatherface popped out, and it freaked me out because like the music, hit me, and then I saw, Leatherface with a chainsaw, and I'll never forget that. Like it just, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I remember I'd listened to that song, after that, and it reminded me of the haunted house, and I thought, man, I like this, but it kind of freaked me out because, Leatherface. But anyway, I've always liked that chord progression too. Those huge kind of sustained, ringing rock chords. And, a G5 power chord, kind of played like Malcolm Young style there with some open strings to a D5 over A, just a big, D5 power chord. And then you'll hear, it's basically an A7 sus4 where you're playing this, it's A, sus4, and then you're also catching that G there on the third fret on the high E. And then the second pass, the G5, the giant, D power chord, and then just an A. And then the last time through, you can hear you kind of overdub like a slide. I usually just slide that chord up, to the 14th fret. And that's the octave of where that A lives, down on the second fret. And I just like the way that sounds. It has that huge, kind of AC/DC, Zeppelin kind of ringing chord sound, and I love that. It reminds me of the Stones or maybe a little bit of Who, in there hiding some Pete Townsend. But I love, chords like that where they're just ringing And I also really dig that A7 sus4. It's unusual. And as we go through this lesson, you're going to see a lot of unusual chords. Because like I said earlier, Dean is definitely not a chord slouch. You know, he has a lot of chords in his arsenal, and he sprinkles them all through, you know, his music. Up next is the main riff to Sex Type Thing. And this is also pretty interesting. It's simple, but it's really effective, and it sounds, you know, super heavy too. But it's based around just this descending, you know, note along the low E string, a B to a B flat to an A to a G, and then eventually it kind of walks down to the open E string too. But those single notes are also combined with an E, you know, they're on the 7th fret on the A, and you're kind of playing like these partial chords or implied chords like this. It's really cool because you're hearing, you know, like that E and the B. So that's kind of, you know, like a E5 over B, I guess, or, you know, the two notes of an E power chord, but backward. And then it's a B flat, so you got that flat 5 in there. And then the 4th, and then the minor 3rd down there, that G. Now, if we flip that around and played it more kind of like an 80s style, you know, if we kind of played it that way, I mean, it's basically the same thing, just in reverse. Almost sounds like a Dokken riff, you know, if you do that. But the part itself is... Alright, up next is the song Dead and Bloated, and I love this song. And honestly, I did notice an argument online a few years ago, and I saw, you know, a couple people, and they were discussing the tuning, and one person was saying, you know, this song's in drop D, and the other person said it was in standard. And honestly, like, I've played this song in cover bands, I've taught this to students over the years, and I always played it in drop D. I just thought that's what he was doing. And when I saw that argument, and I was like, okay, actually, I'm not really sure. I found some live footage of STP, and I saw, like, the camera kind of pans over to Dean's hands, and you could see he was playing like traditional chords, you know, like in E, you know, in standard tuning. And when I watched it, I thought, wow, he's not playing in drop D. It just sounds like it. And I think maybe the bass might be in drop D, so you get that really low D. But, you know, if you see some live footage of playing this, you know, Dean never does any one-finger power chords. He's fretting things and kind of moving around. But there's some really cool chords in the pre-chorus of this song. So we're looking at this part. Right there you can see we did, it's a stacked B sus2, so it's a B sus2 over F sharp, and he's playing all 6 strings, so it's like this huge kind of Pete Townsend, you know, kind of ringing chord, and then a G5 power chord like we had in Wicked Garden, and then it's just a regular, you know, kind of cowboy, you know, E major chord down there. And then you're going to do that stacked, you know, B flat or a B sus2 over F sharp, and then the G5, back to E, and then it moves up a whole step to an F sharp 5 or an F sharp power chord. And you can see he's kind of removing the root and playing E, which would be the flat 7 technically, but he's kind of bouncing between that F sharp and E. And then I love this chord. I'm a huge fan of this chord. That'd be an F sharp 11. And you can hear that in a lot of STPs music. You can also hear that in Rooster by Alice in Chains, and there's a ton of music that features that chord. But I love how he keeps the movement on the low E And he also lets that chord kind of ring, you know, after he plays it a couple times. And after it's, you know, kind of sustained and ringing a little bit, he does kind of dampen it and kind of silence it because, you know, you don't want that to kind of get away from you, especially on stage if you're playing, you know, high volume or something. But that has such a cool sound because you hear it, you know, ringing, but you're also hearing a kind of heavy chunk in there too. I like it. And for another song that has that exact same chord, the F sharp 11, this is from Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart, which is from the Tiny Music album. And this song is packed with a bunch of cool chords. It opens with this A5 sharp 11, which is unusual, but it sounds so cool. You know, it's a great way to, you know, catch your attention or whatever. Just kind of strum through a chord like that. But then as soon as, you know, they kind of open with that chord, it just moves to an F sharp power chord, and they're kind of funking it out, you know, kind of scratching it and everything, you know, muted strums. And then it moves over to an A6 sus2, which that's kind of unusual too. It's just like an A sus2, but you're going to move the fretted part up 2 frets to the 4th fret, and that becomes an A6 sus2. But you got this. You can kind of see right there, he's kind of strumming that F sharp power chord. And they're literally just kind of letting that ring on the top, and they're still kind of strumming through it too. And I really like that contrast between the higher part and the lower part. You kind of hear it moving, even though you're just literally, you know, holding one chord, but it's your strumming hand that's kind of mixing it up a little bit there, you know, sonically with that lower and higher part of the chord. It's really cool. And then it also has that really cool kind of change in it. Speaking of unusual chords, which there are a ton of those, you know, hiding in Stone Temple Pilots music, but take the opening chord from Vaseline, and it's similar to Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart, how you just have this ringing, you know, intro chord. But with Vaseline, you're actually playing what, a B flat major, was it B flat major 13 flat 5, which that's a very oddball chord, but it's awesome. You know, it's very unusual and different. You know, it looks and sounds something like that. So a B flat major 13 flat 5. And you'll hear like it kind of like fades in, and you'll hear Dean kind of playing that chord, and the bass is kind of wow, wow, wow. And then of course but I love that little, you know, kind of treat or whatever right there with that opening chord. Speaking of oddball chords, here's a popular STP song, and the verse has a very strange, you know, series of chords in the progression, and I really like, you know, the song, but I really like these chords, you know. So it starts off, I'm just going to walk through them and then I'll play the part, but it starts with a C sharp minor 7, and then it's a G sharp over C, and then it's a C sharp over B, which is really weird. And then a B flat minor 7 flat 5, and then it ends on A sus2. But you got this. truth be told, I've shown that to students. I've actually played that in a couple cover bands too. And originally, I remember playing this. And I knew it wasn't quite right. I was just using, like power chords and technically, secondary dominance there, walking down. I almost treated that song like a 38 special tune or something. But then later I actually learned the real chords he played, and I was really impressed. I thought, wow, he's doing a lot more than I thought he was. And, I can honestly admit, like, that's a tricky chord progression. It doesn't really, fall comfortably under the fingers. And it's mainly that chord, the C sharp over B. That's just really strange, following this. That's a weird progression. And then right there, you got to flip everything around, to grab that B flat minor 7 flat 5. But that's a great tune, and I love those chords. The last example is from the song Sour Girl, which is on their album number 4. And great album, and I like this song. It was a big kind of radio hit. And the chords, once again, in this song are just bizarre. It's really weird. And the intro, he's really just kind of spelling out, a melodic part or a melody. And he's kind of implying chords. And then he actually starts, moving through a series of strummed chords. So for that intro section, it's something like this. And there it's really just kind of implying, like a F add 9. And then that's kind of like a C over E, technically there. And then it would basically be a C over E flat, so it's kind of implying like a C minor chord. I like that. And then there's a C add 9. And then an F to a G. Then the real fun begins. This would be a D11 over A for like the beginning of the verse. And I'm a sucker for chords like that. I love those kind of chords. It sounds like Pink Floyd or Al Di Meola or some Return to Forever or something like that. So there's the D11 over A. And then we're going to move up and grab this, which you're also kind of fretting there with your thumb, and that's a B flat major 9. And I love those two chords, back and forth in a progression. That's beautiful. I love that. And then you're just going to basically play an F to a G, G sus4, back to G. Really love that transition between the D11 over A and that B flat major 9. Really cool stuff. All right, that's going to wrap this look at the chords of Stone Temple Pilots. And as you could probably tell, I'm a fan. I really do like Dean DeLeo, and I respect Robert too. And if you look at the credits for a lot of this music on their albums, you can see Robert pops up everywhere as far as the music's concerned. So Robert DeLeo is kind of the secret weapon, in STP. And Dean's name popped up a lot too. So, they're brothers. And obviously, they probably were pushing each other and writing these songs and working together. And they've kind of been a pair, as far as a working, pair in music for a long time now. And I really respect both of them. I think they're great musicians. They write great songs. So leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons. And I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.